kind viewers, and welcome back to my channel. I am the one and only Exemplary Chad, and you are now watching part 2 of my two-part series, Arguments Against Atheism. And you heard me correctly. I do not have a stutter, and I did not speak. We are talking about objections that you commonly hear to atheism, and we are responding to those objections. So far, we've talked about Pascal's wager, and we've talked about what started the universe, that great mystery of mysteries, right? So today we're going to continue on. We have 2 more arguments that we're going to go through, and hopefully you will find something compelling to take away from our discussion of these arguments, just as you did the first part of this video. So let's talk about it. So something that I know I've heard a lot in my decade-plus span as an atheist is the idea that it takes just as much faith to be an atheist as it does to be a theist. Now, we have a couple of problems with this, but the first and most important, I think, is a conflation of terms. In this case, the particular term that we find problematic is the term faith. And it's being applied to what atheists believe. And I think that this is not entirely justified. Here's why. So faith and belief are 2 different things. If you say it takes just as much belief to be an atheist as it does to be a theist, I'd be inclined to agree with you. It takes exactly 1 belief, right? I believe that there is no God. A theist believes that there is a God. That's 1 belief, right? The difference is that this does not necessarily count as faith, and here's why. So you have 2 different kinds of beliefs in the world, right? And I think most philosophers can agree on my use of these terms. On the one hand, you have a justified belief. That is, something that you hold to be true, something that you assert to be true, and it's based on justified reasons. It's based on evidence, it's based on experience, it's based on, what have you, all of these other things. This would be something like my belief that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. It does require a belief, right? However, this is a justified belief. All evidence indicates that the sun will in fact rise tomorrow, as it's risen every day that I've been alive so far, and nobody seems to have detected anything that would indicate that it won't rise tomorrow, right? So my belief that the sun is going to rise tomorrow is a justified belief, as it's based on real-world conditions and evidence. Now, compare this to an unjustified belief, and this is really what the term faith represents. Now, this is not to make value judgments or anything like that, or say that nobody should ever have any unjustified beliefs. That's not a claim that I'm necessarily willing to make. However, it should be noted that an unjustified belief is certainly not the same thing as a justified belief. For instance, if I have no evidence that an entity exists, I am justified in believing that it does not exist. This does not require faith. This only requires a justified belief. If I have no evidence that that same thing exists, and yet I do believe that it exists, this is an unjustified belief, and therefore can be categorized as faith. And I don't think this is a difficult concept for most theists to understand. Most of us don't believe in the flying spaghetti monster. We don't believe in unicorns. We don't believe in leprechauns. There are more questionable things like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and stuff like that. Most of us don't believe in these things because we don't have evidence that they exist, so we can safely assume that they don't. Again, this does not require faith. This only requires a justified belief. The only difference between myself and a theist is that I don't extend faith to a God, just as I don't extend faith to the Easter Bunny, right? Now, this is not to compare them in any offensive way or anything like that. It's just they're both things that I happen to believe do not exist. And this whole faith question, I don't think is a terribly controversial one. I think most theists will agree that they believe on the basis of faith. This is not on the basis of evidence. This is not on the basis of or anything like that. I mean, it says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, right? It's not you have been saved through evidence. You have been saved through forethought. You have been saved through insight. You have been saved through logic, anything like that. It's you have been saved through faith, right? That comes from Ephesians, by the way. So the difference between the beliefs of a theist and the beliefs of an atheist really just comes down to whether an unjustified belief is acceptable to you. I think for most theists it is, and this is what we refer to as faith. And for most atheists, an unjustified belief is not acceptable. Just as I don't believe in any infinite number of things that could exist in the universe and yet have no evidence for, I also don't believe in a God because I don't find any evidence for it. I simply don't have faith. Okay, this fourth and final question that we're going to address in this series for right now pertains to essentially anecdotal evidence, right? How do you explain the time when I prayed and the thing that I prayed for happened? How do you explain the time when I was in a car accident and I felt a presence? How do you explain that, X, Y, and Z, all of these other things? The simplest answer goes back to what we said about the beginning of the universe. I am at liberty to say, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to explain every phenomenon in your life. And I think that that's perfectly acceptable. What I do know is that we as a species, as the human race, do have a tendency to make attribution errors. These errors can stem from anything from sensory mistakes that tend to happen, to the recalling of our own emotions, to the prediction of our own behaviors, all of these different things. For instance, if you go out on a date with a person and you go to an amusement park, something that would get you physically excited, right? Say you ride a roller coaster or something with a date with a potential partner. You're going to be excited, you're going to have an increased heart rate, an increased sweat production, all of these other things that are typically symptomatic of physical arousal. So what studies have shown is that after getting off of that roller coaster, you're more likely to attribute those feelings to your potential partner than you are to riding on that roller coaster. This is the kind of thing that happens all the time. And this is, as I said, called an attribution error. Now, we also do the same thing when we're in traffic. If somebody else makes a mistake or somebody else cuts me off while I'm driving, well, that person is automatically a horrible person. They're a bad person. The reason that they cut me off is that they are systematically bad people. However, if I cut somebody off, it's a mistake. It's a product of a bad day. It's a once in a lifetime thing that I would cut this person off, right? I'm a good person. I just did this because of X. This is another example of an attribution error. Now, why is all of this relevant, you might be asking me? Well, the reason is that when we don't have an explanation for something, sometimes we tend to attribute it to the wrong cause. In this case, I'm talking specifically about a God. If something happened in your life where, say, perhaps you were really low on money, you couldn't afford your rent, and you were praying and praying and praying, and then all of a sudden somebody came through and gave you some money, right? If you're the praying type, you probably will attribute that to your prayer. You'll attribute it to your God. You'll attribute it to your religious belief, right? Maybe that is the case. Who knows? But that doesn't necessitate that that's the case. That's not evidence for a God. That's just evidence that you wanted something and that thing happened. This happens all the time in our lives. This happens absolutely constantly. So there's not necessarily a reason that you should attribute that to God. Similarly, people have had near-death experiences, people have had out-of-body experiences, that sort of thing. Anything surrounding death tends to become rather mystified. However, there have been experiments done to show that scientists can replicate these exact phenomena in people, right? The whole going down a tunnel, walking towards the light, that whole thing, that's a very explainable scientific phenomenon, right? It's something that previously people have attributed to an ascension to heaven. But now we know that this may not necessarily be the case. This may simply be the case of certain synaptic firings that go off in your brain when you're close to death. Again, this is just to highlight, illustrate the point that simply not having an explanation for something that happens in your life or something that happens in the world at large, not having that explanation does not necessitate the belief in a particular God or a particular religion. Thank you so much for watching this video. I have been your host, Exemplary Chad. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you like what you see, leave me some comments below if you think there's anything I can do better, if there's another topic you'd like for me to tackle in the coming future, please just let me know, and I look forward to seeing you in my very next video, which hopefully will be coming out sometime next week. So, again, I have been your host, Exemplary Chad. You can also check me out on the God Works Out channel. We have Reason panel discussions every Sunday night, so go see those. You can watch the videos on demand, you can watch them live and ask us questions. All sorts of good things are happening. So check out God Works Out, check out my other feature channels, subscribe to this channel, all of those good things. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to love each other. I'll see you in the next video.